It's time for the Double Stop with Brian Sword.
Welcome to the Double Stop Podcast. I'm Brian Sword. This week, I have an interview with Joe Satriani's longtime producer, John Cuniberti. He's got lots of great stories, including working with Joe, with George Lynch, and with the Dead Kennedys. Let's get right to it.
Technology has really, in a lot of ways, reinvented my career. I mean, my ability to stay here in my own home and mix records from people all over the world is pretty fantastic. So, yeah, and they can get the mixes back immediately.
Yeah, and that's really seems to be the way things are going. Like I talked to Bo Hill, he does that. Mm-hmm. Bob St. John, same thing. You know, mixing records at home for people all over the world. Yeah, it's changed everything from top to bottom, it seems.
Yeah, there's the advantages and disadvantages, but I think if it's handled properly and respectfully, I think there's much more advantages now with technology. I'm not one of those old farts that begrudges it all and was wishing for the old days, the way we used to do it. Because it was a pain in the ass, quite honestly. So.
What you're saying, you don't miss tape?
I mix the tape, actually. It's one of the few things I still do the same way.
Oh, really?
Not every project. It kind of depends on what the client's looking for and what I'm hearing. But a lot of the rock stuff I do, I mix in the box, and then it goes to a custom Neve summing a mixer that I built, and then from there it goes to a SSL bus compressor, which I still think is the best bus compressor ever made, and then it goes right to half-inch tape. So the signal path actually from the mix, from the mix to the tape is not all that different than it was, 30 years ago. So it's kind of, for me, it's really the best of both worlds.
Now let's take things back. Let's go right back to the beginning. I always tend to start these interviews the same way. I'm curious where'd you grow up and what kind of musical family did you grow up in?
Well, I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. My parents weren't musicians, didn't play instruments or anything, but my mother loved music from the very beginning. I can remember there was music being played in the house. She always had her records playing. She grew up with big bands and such, and but she played a lot of music from the 50s and early 60s. That just became part of our family life. There's always music in the house. Whether it be something like a Jackie Wilson record or Everly Brothers or something. So from very early on, I was exposed to music. And
I understand you started your path as a musician. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, I think because of that, I seemed to have some kind of affinity for it, and I decided I wanted to play drums, and I think like a lot of people my age, we saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, and I said, well, I can do that.
How hard can it be?
I might not be able to sing and play guitar, but I can do what that guy's doing. So, got myself a set of drums and put together a band, and I played, in rock and roll bands, garage bands, I guess is what you'd call them, and worked our way up the food chain in the Bay Area. Eventually met Eddie Mahoney, who later became Eddie Money, put together a band called the Rockets, And that led us into recording studios where at that point I made the switch, where I said, well, I don't want to be a drummer anymore. I want to do what those guys are doing, the guys behind the glass. I thought that was much more interesting and much more, had more control, it was more fun. Plus it brought me back to my early experiences with music, where, I could be more involved with it. As a drummer, of course, you play your parts and then you sit down on a couch and everybody else does everything else. And your involvement wasn't all that great back then, So I always thought, there was something truly magical about records. I remember when I was young and I had a transistor radio and would listen to music through it. And at night, parents would put you in bed and you'd take your little transistor radio and you'd lay in bed and listen to this. I'm sure millions of kids did this around the same time because, you would, when you heard a song like Telstar, for instance, through a little 2-inch speaker at, an hour after your bedtime with the lights out, it took you to a place. I mean, you would hear something like that, and you think, where does this music come from? I mean, who's making this, and what is it, and where, how do they do it? So that always kind of stuck with me. So when I finally got into a recording studio and I started to see the magic of putting together music and making records, I said, oh, man, that's what I want to do. And so it wasn't the easiest transition I've ever made.
I bet, yeah.
I don't want to play drums anymore. I want to be a recording engineer. It wasn't. It took me 10 years probably before I was really good enough to make a record where I could go, yeah, that's pretty good, or would someone would actually pay me to do it. I guess it would be like a guitar player, seeing a guitar player and then saying, oh, I'm going to do that. And then they go buy a guitar, and then they think that they're going to be making records right away. And
yeah,
of course,
totally.
You
got 10 years of making noise in your bedroom first.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like that with just about anything that requires a skill and practice and some discipline, and that's certainly what being a recording engineer required.
Now, did somebody take you under their wing? How was that 10 years of learning your craft?
Well, ironically, the recording engineer that had taken the Rockets into the studio became a good friend and actually became a mentor, and his name is Tom Lubin. Tom worked for CBS Records in San Francisco, and he was making Sly Stone records and Simon and Garfunkel records, and working with Roy Halley, and he really got it. He was really a great engineer, and when he heard that I was interested in becoming a recording engineer, he really helped me. He gave me a lot of encouragement, told me who to call and where to go and what to do, and but it still took a long time.
And what would have been your first real gig then as an engineer?
I think like the first time somebody actually paid me to engineer something, I was working at a studio that a friend of mine had built. Back in those days, if you wanted to work in a studio, there were really only two ways. You either had to know somebody and you start off as a janitor and work your way up, and maybe someday, if you're lucky, you'll get to be an intern, and then, or you just build your own studio. And that was difficult then, the early 70s, late 70s. You couldn't go to Guitar Center and buy a studio and come home and be a recording engineer. You had to source tape recorders and broken down consoles and microphones and such from other studios primarily, or surplus stores, wherever you could get the gear. And a friend of mine, Dan Alexander, had put together the studio here in the Bay Area, and we worked together there, and we started recording local bands and such, and we did it because we both loved recording, and we never really thought it was going to ever compete with the other studios in town, because how could you? I mean, the gap was huge. People were not recording at home, and people were not recording in small little isolated studios in their garages. It just wasn't happening. So, but it just happened to be around the same time where punk music was becoming popular, if you will, and the Dead Kennedys showed up one day, and I think they were one of the first bands I actually recorded, where they paid me to do it.
Yeah.
I wasn't just recording my friends or my own band or something, It's like, we're going to pay you $20 an hour and you're going to record us. And they were a great live band, so it was a fairly straightforward process. And that was how I met them. And I also met Joe Satriani around the same time at a live gig, actually. And I went up to Joe after I saw him for the first time. I said, "Hey, man, I don't know who you are, but you're an amazing guitar player. I want to record you, and I have a studio, so let's do this." And he agreed. Yeah, and that was probably the smartest thing I had ever done. And I tell people now, I tell young interns and would-be engineers, say, "Man, you got to make your own breaks in this business. You got to say yes to everything. You got to pursue. If you hear somebody who's doing something cool, go to them and tell them that, and then ask them if there's something you can do to help them. And doors will open." And and that's how it worked for me. And I hear that that's how it works for other people. So I'm assuming it's good advice.
Yeah, I think that's pretty solid. So that first Dead Kennedys record you did, at what level were they at that point?
Well, they were a very good live band. They had probably been playing for a few years before I met them. They had already put out a number of singles, 7-inch singles. I don't think they had a full-length album at that point. And I don't know if they had a falling out with the studio they were working at, or why they decided they wanted to come to the studio we had built. It was a studio called Tewksbury. And I don't know. I remember they came in and they sat up and they just basically played. And because they were a live band, it was really more of like documenting what they do live than it was, producing a record. And so I think I worked on the record called, again, these are all singles. Nazi Punks Fuck Off, I think, was one of them. And there was a couple of others. Or we did some of the overdubs on California Uber Alice. I can't remember specifically, but that was where I met them and things got started. Later on, when I started working at a bigger studio in San Francisco called Hyde Street Studios, that was actually a new studio at the time. They'd just taken over the studio from Wally Heider's, which was a world-famous recording studio. They had 3 or 4 of them. I think there was one in New York, one in L.A., and one in San Francisco. There's 3 of them. And they had closed their doors, got out of business, so a new studio took over there. And that's when the Dead Kennedys came back, and over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, I recorded their 3 albums, Plastic Surgery Disasters, Frankenchrist, and Bedtime for Democracy, the 3 albums.
And at that same point, you were also starting to work with Joe then.
Yeah, simultaneously, actually.
Talk about polar opposite styles of music.
Yeah, really. I mean, in the beginning, Joe was in a band called The Squares, and they were a power pop trio, kind of like the Police or something. Yeah, kind of like the Police or something like that. Really good bass player, singer. Jeff Campitelli was the drummer who went on to play with Joe.
Yeah.
And, of course, Joe. And Joe sang, and the other guy sang, and, his name was Andy. And they looked around for, we did a bunch of demos. They looked around for recording contracts, never got one. And, but they were a good live band, and they were, kind of a pop version of the Dead Kennedys. They came in, they set up, they recorded, and they got out. In those days, you made recordings in a day or two. They weren't these long, extended, overdub sessions that would go on for months. Everything was done, pretty quickly. And then the Squares broke up, and then Joe came to me and he said, "Hey, I want to do a solo record, and I'd like you to engineer it." So it was done very differently than those earlier records, because it was just really Joe and his guitar and a bunch of ideas and a drum machine. We brought Jeff in to play drums on a few things, play percussion. But they were very, everything was recorded one track at a time. Everything was done systematically. Everything was mapped out. And I would do that at night with him because he was on like a super budget. And then, by then I was managing the studio, so I could really work with him on the price, and we'd stay up all night working on stuff. But then the next day I'd have to come in and work with the Dead Kennedys, for instance, because they had a record deal and they actually could pay to have studio time like in normal business hours.
And did they know that you'd been up all night?
Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes it was probably obvious. And quite honestly, that didn't happen that often, but it did. There were times where I tried to organize it so I could be my best, but there were times where I'd be up, get home at 3 or 4 in the morning from a Satriani session and have to be back at the studio at 11 in the morning.
That's not
start
too
with.
bad.
Now, it wasn't terrible.
No.
But the styles are very different. The energy was different, and the approach, and then the outcome was very different. If you sit between the speakers and you listen to the Dead Kennedys and you listen to Not of This Earth, that's a completely different experience. And it really required me as an engineer to really be open to serving the artist and the song, not try to jam my thing, my sound. There's engineers who think they have a sound, and I always thought that was a little odd, seeing as that it's not their name on the album, or on the cover, that is. So I always felt like my job was to try to interpret well, in Joe's case, what was in his head. And the Dead Kennedys, it was more like what was people responding to at a show. I'd go to one of their gigs, and the place was crazy. The place had just come apart, and of course there was the pit and the stage diving and all that stuff going on. So, how do you get that on a record? And that was the challenge there, was to try to get that kind of spontaneity and energy into a record. It's funny, those records eventually morphed more and more into like studio productions, because a lot of what I was doing with Joe, I was starting to apply to their records. And they liked it. Like reverb, for instance.
Oh, sure.
With Joe and I used to love, ambience and reverb, and we're always fooling around with delays and stuff like that. And, punk music, it was dry. Really, I don't think there's any reverb on, like, a Sex Pistol record. I don't think there is at all. And I think that's what a lot of them were doing. But when I started, like, exposing Jello Biafra or Ray, or Klaus, those guys, to reverbs and delays, they said, "Oh, wow, what's that?" And the way they pictured it was, "Oh, well, now we don't have to sound like these other bands. We don't have to sound like X. We don't have to sound like the Sex Pistols. Now we can we can actually start sounding more like the Dead Kennedys and less like the Ramones. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
they really kind of, they kind of embraced it, and they went nuts with it. I mean, some of the stuff on the Frankenchrist album is just drenched in reverb. That's very unpunk, by the way.
And how did their fans respond to that?
Well, not real well. I think they got a lot of backlash from it. But over time, I think people began to appreciate what they brought to the party, because I think they would have just gone into the background with all the other bands. It's all sounded the same. And I think eventually people accepted it and as a part of their sound. Now, the third record, I think I toned it back a little, because I felt like we'd gone a little too far. And, it's like anything, once you go too far, there's, where do you go with that?
Yeah.
So I think on the third album, I kind of pulled it all back a little bit, and it was a little bit more conservative. And ironically, it's probably one of their least favorite records. So I think somewhere between the first two albums, we hit the sweet spot with it, but I don't know. The jury's out on it, I think.
So the sessions that you were doing with Joe, those are the same recordings that became Not of This Earth? Or were they more just demos?
No, we couldn't afford to do demos.
Yeah.
I think with Joe, because the way the records were being made, systematically, one track at a time, there was no real need to do a demo. I mean, if you're going to sit there for 2 hours and work on that rhythm guitar part, let's make it a keeper. Let's do what we have to do to make it be something that we can actually keep, not something we're going to do later, when we have some money or something like that. I mean, Joe, I think walked in with $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 or something like that, and wanted to make this record. And it's very time consuming when you don't have a band. If you got a band, you set them up. I can record a whole album, in a day. Really, all the parts, assuming that everyone's got their shit together. But when you're doing it one track at a time, it takes weeks. So with Joe, he would come in and we'd work from 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock in the morning, and we would just do bass guitar and maybe get one solo done. And then he'd come back the next day and we'd work another 2 or 3 hours. And then we'd come in on the weekend and maybe work the entire weekend, and then come back. It was that kind of thing. And we did it because I know why he did it. He did it because he had to do it as an artist. But I was really liked it because it was allowing me to do things like I never could do, because he didn't really care about the studio part of it. He said, just do whatever you want to do. And, I didn't really hear that from other bands. Most of the other bands go, this is what we do, just be sure you get it recorded properly. With Joe, it was like, do it the way you want to do it. Go set up whatever mic you want, wherever you want to do it, plug in whatever gear you want. Let's just have fun with this thing. And it was real freeing. And, there was a lot of mistakes made, and some we kept. And then there was a lot of really exciting moments. And I think I think both of us look fondly back at that period. We know we can't go back to that, but I think that he and I both will be the first to acknowledge that there's certainly was some magic in taking chances and not knowing much about what we were doing or why we were doing it, and having like zero pressure of a record label or fans to deal with.
Yeah, there's no expectations. You can do whatever you want.
Exactly. And I hear this with new music today. When I hear somebody like Lorde, for instance, I go, God, what's going to happen to her and her music after the record companies start making demands and the fans start making demands, and what's going to happen?
Yeah.
She's still going to be able to produce such wonderful music, I mean, it's very difficult. I mean, by the time we got to Serving with the Alien, which was the next record, the pressure was already cranked up. I mean,
Was it? Yeah.
People were already. Oh yeah. I mean, people were already going, well, what's this going to be like? You're going to do this, aren't you? You're going to do that, aren't you? I hope you don't do that. It was already starting to, because we were at that point we're spending record companies' money, and they had something to say about it.
You're on Relativity at that point, or he is, I mean, and
Yeah.
So he self-financed the first one, and it got picked up by Relativity, which was at that point, a pretty small label. And then they financed Surfing, and then all of a sudden you're playing with the big boys now. Yeah.
Well, yes. Well, we thought we were. I mean, it was it was one of those things where they said, well, we really love the first record, but the next record's got to be better. Here's, I think they gave us $25,000-$30,000 or something to do it, which which even then wasn't that much money. That's what the Dead Kennedys were spending on an album.
Right.
$20,000 was not unusual. So suddenly we had to schedule things and think about budget. Well, if we work for 5 days, it's going to cost this much. But maybe if I go to the studio and book 7 days solid, they'll give us a break. And if we rent this gear, if I rent it for 5 days rather than 3 days, I'll get a break on that. And it's all that. You're suddenly thinking about the dollars and the cents and the budget. And then when we walked into the studio and started working, which now is during normal business hours because we had a budget, there's a clock on the wall, and you're looking at the clock, and you go, well, Joe wanted to come in and get these drums recorded and get his bass part recorded, and we wanted to get it done by 2 o'clock because the budget. And now it's 3:30, and he's struggling with the bass part, and suddenly, the vibe starts changing. We start getting nervous. And concerned, and then there's pressure, the publicity machine is already cranking up. Joe's already starting to do interviews. The photographer will be here on Thursday. The tour dates are set. Album release is set, which means the mastering date is already booked, which means the mixes have to be done by May 1st or whatever it was. And it's a very different kind of atmosphere to be creative in. It's something you have to adapt to, and we did, and I believe we rose to the occasion.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah,
because it's funny because Surfing is an interesting time because it's Joe's first big break. He has to prove that he can do it. We've got record company money. We have no idea how this thing is going to be accepted once it gets really promoted. Joe and I don't think we ever thought anybody would ever like any of it, to be honest. I mean, it was,
really, eh?
We liked it. And then, when you like something, you assume that other people will like it too. I mean, that's just sort of the natural tendency of an artist, isn't it?
Sure.
I mean,
it's good.
Yeah. That's why you can go on YouTube and see the most horrendous talent. Because they like it. They think it's great. Their mom said it was great.
Yeah, they're proud of it.
But you listen to it and you go, oh, my God, what is this? Why did they even bother? And so, for all we knew, that's where we were at. We didn't know that, it was bound to be successful. And but then when it did become successful and we moved into Flying in the Blue Dream, suddenly we had credibility with the record company. Suddenly we had more money. Suddenly we could start calling our own shots. And so things rapidly changed when we did Flying, because at that point it's like, oh, we're going to do 18 songs. What? That's a double album. Oh, that's your problem. That's your problem, record company. Oh, by the way, did we mention Joe's going to sing? I hope you guys are okay with that. I mean, so So in a way, Flying in the Blue Dream was kind of a return to Not of This Earth, where Joe and I and some of the other guys that were involved was like, hey, we're going to do what we want.
It's all about who's got the power, right?
Well, I don't know if it's so much power as it is, well, we had one record, it was successful. If we never have another successful record again, we don't care because we already have a successful record. We're going to go back to art, for art's sake. And, that's why that record is so extensive and it's got so much stuff on it and it's so nutty. I think Joe had a real sense of freedom musically with that record.
What do you think led him to sing? Was it something he always wanted to do and he did it before in his early bands, or was there a bit of a statement being made?
No, I don't think there was a statement like an FU. I think it was more because surfing, nobody really heard Not of This Earth. A lot of people heard surfing, but I don't think the jury was out on whether or not Joe was going to be an instrumental guitar god for the rest of his life. I don't think that there was necessarily, a sense of that, that's just how it's going to be. And it was kind of a natural thing for Joe. I mean, Joe has always sang and played guitar. I mean, when I met him, he was singing and playing guitar. I knew he could sing. I know he has a good sense of pitch and how to compose lyrics. So I encouraged it. Excuse me. When he mentioned he wanted to do it, I said, okay. I was maybe the only person. The record company was going like, what?
Yeah. You just had a platinum record. What do you mean you're going to start singing?
Yeah, you're going to screw up everything.
Yeah.
And, and I said, okay, cool, let's go, let's do it, And because I had confidence in his ability to do it. So I think that if you ask him why he wanted to, I think he would say that, excuse me, I think he would say there's songs that have to be sung. They don't work as well as just an instrumental guitar. They really require a lyric and a vocal. And I have these songs in me, and I want to express them. And that's why there's a Chicken Foot record, and that's why he's continued to sing on and off through all his records. I think as a songwriter, as an artist, there's things that he just has to express in that way, opposed to the restrictive instrumental guitar thing that he's created.
And not only did he sing on that record, he did music videos on those songs and released them as singles.
Well, hey, listen, it was the 80s. And if you didn't have a music video, well, you just weren't going to be successful. So, absolutely. I mean, that was definitely mandatory. And the record companies they were part of the record company recording contracts that, by the way, you will be doing a video, and you're going to be paying for half of it. And It was mandatory. Because, MTV at the time, and I don't even know if VH1 was even in existence at that point, but certainly MTV was really the way to reach people on a mass level quickly. And so it only made sense that if Joe's going to sing, that those would be the songs. So it was Big Bad Moon, I believe, were the two songs that they made videos of and promoted, to some success, I guess. I'm not sure how they gauge, the success of those things.
In Canada, we have Much Music and the equivalent MTV, and those videos were aired all the time. They're always, steady rotation on Much Music. Yeah,
well, there you go. Then I think that a lot of people got to hear Joe. But it's funny, they're hearing Joe as a singer, like he's in a band, and he's singing I Believe, and so they go buy his record, and it's all instrumental. I mean, that must have been pretty disconcerting, The record company said, well, Joe, if you start singing, that's going to be great because we'll attract more women, because up till then you go to a show and it was nothing but kids in black, kids with long hair and black T-shirts.
Yeah, it's a bunch of guitar players there. Check them out.
Metalheads.
Yeah.
And that was the fan base. So Joe sings "I Believe," and suddenly now they're bringing their girlfriends. Yeah. I don't think strategically that was the plan. Again, I think it was an artistic decision on Joe's part. But it didn't bode well with the record reviewers. They really thought, Surfing with the Alien, huge success, what a quirk, weird record, blah, blah, blah. Now he's setting us up to, kill him. He does a double record, so there's tons of material to criticize, and he sings. And, I think they went after him on that, and it freaked him out. Freaked me out. I read stuff, it's like, holy cow, how can people say that?
Really, eh? They were that harsh.
That's mean. That's mean,
I didn't realize.
That's mean.
I'm surprised they were that harsh.
Oh, they were very harsh. Very harsh. It's that sophomore effort,
Yeah.
I mean, even though it's the third record technically, if you have a successful record, you set yourself up for criticism. And, I think there was a lot of music reviewers that just didn't get it, didn't get what Joe was doing. And they still don't, some of them.
Yeah. Well, that's how it goes.
Well, yeah, it's fine.
Now, on the next record, it was primarily credited the production side to Andy Johns, but you were still all over it. And what's interesting, I find, is that there are some songs that you're co-produced with Andy, and then some you did yourself. So what was the process like, and what led to Andy Johns coming in?
When we started the Extremist, Joe really wanted to do a record very differently than the previous ones.
Okay.
He could afford and had the sort of credibility with other musicians to call in people to play on his record and really make it a special event. Joe doesn't like to do anything the same way twice if he can help it. And the idea of being in the room, with other peers playing your music, it was something that he'd always wanted to do but couldn't do it for one reason or another. So the idea of getting together with Simon Phillips and Doug Wimbish and Phil Ashley in a recording studio, even outside of the Bay Area, so we wouldn't even have the influences that we had here, there, in an isolated location, in this case Bearsville, which was a residential studio where everybody lived together and everybody rehearsed together and everybody made the record together. And it was winter and it was snowing. It was very, very different atmosphere from what we were used to. And on paper, I just thought that this was going to be the greatest record we will have ever made. And I think Joe was very, very comfortable and confident with going in. But I don't know, within probably the first 2 or 3 days, Joe started getting really queasy about the whole process. He felt the musicians were not listening to him, kind of just doing what they want to do. And he wasn't used to that. And the whole record was sort of going down a path that he didn't want it to go, musically, artistically. Everyone was perfectly professional and polite and well-mannered, and there wasn't any nonsense. There were no egos. It was just that, if you hire Simon Phillips to play drums, well, that's what you get.
Yeah, totally.
You don't, he's not a drum machine, and he's not, he's not going to be able to suddenly play like Ringo. He's going to play, and I don't think that it might, maybe Joe was just naive about that. You know, I just thought, well, you bring these guys in, everyone brings something to the party, and you turn out something that no one could have ever done on their own. You get this other thing, and I think that's okay. And while I was there, and I was in the control room, and I was listening to what those guys were playing, I was going, holy cow, this is awesome. You know, I was like really excited about it. But then I started noticing that Joe was just like really unhappy. And he said to me, he says, man, this thing is just going the wrong way. I say to Simon, you know, play it like this, and then he goes out and just plays it the way he wants to do, the way he wants to do it, and I don't want to get into a big argument with him, but the clock is ticking. It's costing me thousands of dollars a day, you know, and I'm not happy with this. And so we got through the 2 weeks or 10 days or whatever it was we were there, and we returned to San Francisco, and Joe basically put the whole project on hold. He says, I need to review all this stuff. You know, I think I got together with him a couple of times and we did a bunch of rough mixes, and he had to like live with it. He needed to decide whether or not we got anything at all. So then he came back to me and said, okay, so there's things that we did I don't like. Let's start replacing stuff. And so we tried all kinds of things to change what we had recorded in New York. We might have changed his guitar parts. We might have, you know, this is all on analog tape, by the way. None of this stuff's in a computer, so it isn't like I can sit there and chop together Simon Phillips's, you know, drum performance and create a new arrangement or something like that, you know. And so, you know, being able to salvage parts was really not in the cards. Basically, you had to use what you've got. And so we spent time fooling around with it. I did some additional recording. I think we even re-recorded some of the material. But Joe was not happy with it. And then at some point, the conversation finally came around to, we need to do something radical. And we need to call in a producer, and he needs to have his own rhythm section, and we need to rebuild this record from the ground up. And by that point, I was so frustrated with the process, and with Joe being so unhappy with what he had, I was 100% supportive of it. You know, when I heard that they were going to hire Andy, I thought, oh, that's fantastic. I mean, Andy was a mentor. I mean, you know, he's my same age, but his track record was insane at that point, and I just felt honored, you know. So we packed up all the tapes and we sent Joe to L.A. and then Andy took over, brought in the Bissonnettes, Greg and Matt, created a new rhythm section, re-recorded the record for the most part, and then began to start using some of the material from that we had done in New York. So ultimately, the Extremist has material from New York, and the stuff he did with Andy, of course, and even some of the stuff we did in San Francisco. So it's there's 3 or 4 songs that are total hodgepodge, you know. Guitar solo for Summer Song I recorded in San Francisco, to the track that was recorded in New York, but then the drums and bass were re-recorded in LA. You know, it's one of those kinds of things. And then Rabina's Blue Sky Happiness, I believe, was, or New Blues. Those songs were all from New York, and Andy mixed them. So it was a huge melting pot of ideas and engineers, or well, it's just Andy and I, and recording studios and musicians and stuff, and he ended up with that record, and that's how that came about, and it took almost 2 years to do all that.
Wow!
And I don't think that's that's not a process I would recommend for anybody, and I think Joe learned a lot about that, and I don't think we'll ever do that again.
And then sometime around there, you got a call from George Lynch then. That'd be at the right time, right?
Yeah, in fact, when I was working with George Lynch in L.A. at a studio, Joe was mixing the Extremist with Andy. And I remember going over to the studio and meeting Joe, and he would play me mixes that they were doing. And asked me for my opinion. You think the cymbals are too loud, or do you think that delay is too loud on my solo guitar? Stuff like that.
So it didn't really affect your relationship then? You're still close, even if you pulled in Andy?
No, not at all. But Joe and I's relationship, when it comes to making records, is I've always felt, and I think, is what's good for Joe is good for me. In other words, whatever I can do to support him is actually to my best interest, because him making great popular records is only going to increase his popularity, and if his popularity is increased, well, that's good for me. So I've always been 100% supportive of him. I love the guy like a brother. I don't think anything could come between us. I really don't. I mean, I understand as an artist he has to work with other people. I never felt that we were attached at the hip, and I'd be a liar to say that I wasn't jealous that, oh man, I wish I could have done that song, or oh man, I wish I could have worked with that drummer, or oh man, I wish I could have worked at that studio. I mean, there's time. There's those things, but I've never. I've always supported Joe as an artist in doing whatever it was he needed to do, and he knows that. He knows that. I mean, and as a result, a year or two will go by, we don't even talk. We might touch base once in a while. Hey, how's it going? Something like that. But I know that he needs to do what he needs to do.
Yeah.
And I'm totally supportive of it. Yeah. And he's been super kind with me when he talks about, particularly with this box set now. I mean, when he talks about the past, and he's been very, very kind with going out of his way to mention me and my contributions and stuff. He's been really, really great with that kind of stuff. He always has been, but particularly now when he's reflecting back to those days. And they were, a lot of those days were very, very difficult and very, very trying. And we had our moments for sure.
Now tell me about the Lynch record. How do you look back on that?
Well, I felt like I was sort of, I don't want to say taken advantage of, but I want to say that it was sold to me as one thing, but it turned out to be something else.
Okay.
And, George is an amazing guy. I mean, I really got along well with George. Really great sense of humor. Super guitar player. I mean, it was fantastic. But I later realized that this solo instrumental record that he wanted to do, actually it turned out to not be an instrumental record, but the solo record he wanted to do was something he floated to Elektra at the time to help him pay, I believe, an IRS bill.
Oh, really?
And so, yeah, I mean, listen, people got to do what they got to do.
Sure.
But, he never really supported the record after it was released. He never really toured behind it, never put any energy into it after, because once he got the money and paid his bills off, he moved on to other things. And I was always kind of disappointed with that. It was never really laid out to me that this is what we were doing and why we were doing it. So, and the signs were on the wall. I mean, really early on, my first meeting with him in Arizona, I got to his little studio, and I says, okay, well, let me hear what you've got, because I hadn't heard anything. And he played me 2 songs that were pretty complete, and then maybe 3 other songs that were half complete, and that was it. And I said, well, we don't have an album here. I mean, what are we going to do? How do we make an album out of it? Oh, no worries, no problem. I'm going to come up with a couple more songs. I got some ideas for this and that. And Oh, so I sat around with him for another couple of days, and we finished a couple of songs, the arrangements, and worked some parts out. But I left there with my head spinning, because that's not what I'm used to. I'm used to Joe. He walks in with a cassette or a recording of all 10, 12, 15 songs, all demoed, all the parts, all the arrangements, everything, all done. That's what I'm used to. And with George, it was like, no. And he says, well, let's book the studio. I said, you want to book a studio? We only got 6 songs, and they're not even finished. And so, we booked the studio. We went to the studio, and oddly enough, or sadly enough, the day we got there, there was the Rodney King riot, or whatever you want to call it, blocks away from the studio. Everything was shut down. In fact, the brick went through the studio window. And it was complete, total chaos. So, again, it was not a smooth operation. I had incomplete songs. I wasn't even sure who the band was going to be. We had a riot going on down the street. Basically, we were quarantined in our hotel rooms for a couple of days. It was a mess.
How'd you pull it together?
But by the grace of God, I guess. First of all, when you've got really talented people in a room together, good things happen. So we brought Fonheiser was the drummer, Chris Solberg was a bass player. I had a really good rhythm section. George had ideas. We did a lot of writing on the fly. Then he would bring his friends in to sing. The Nelsons, of all people, delightful individuals, very, very talented, had a lot of good ideas. Who are the other guys? Ian Gillan?
Yeah, Ray Gillan was on it. I think that was Ray Gillan's last recording. I think that was his last proper recording before he passed.
Yes, Ray. Yeah, yes, it was.
And how was he at that point? Was he like very sick or?
He was fine.
He was fine. Yeah.
No, not at all. I didn't know he was sick.
Yeah.
Nobody talked about it. He came in and just sang great, And then there was the guy from Deep Purple. I forgot his name.
Glenn Hughes.
Glenn Hughes, yeah. And great. I mean, they came in basically and said, what do you got? And George would play him a song, and they go, you got lyrics? And George would go, no. And he goes, okay, well, I'll write some. I mean, that's how it went. And I wasn't really used to it. It was a little disconcerting. But we got through it, and the record's okay. I mean, I listened to it a year or so ago, and I thought, this ain't bad. I mean, there's some very talented people on it, and some of the songs are pretty good. But I haven't talked to George since. I tried to contact him a few times, and he never got back to me. I don't think he's got a funk with me or anything. I mean, maybe, I don't know. I guess when you move on, you move on.
I guess.
I don't know. So.
When I look back at that album, I find the vocal songs, I think the Ray Gillan song is very strong. I think some of the other vocal songs are fairly, they don't really hold up. But the instrumental songs are amazing. And I wish it was that. I wish it was a whole album of that. And he's never done it. But those 3 instrumentals, that's worth the price of admission alone for me, because they're freaking fantastic. Yeah. Well,
going in, that's what I was told we were going to do.
Yeah.
I was told we were going to do an instrumental record. And, which I felt like I was competent at doing at that point. So I thought, okay, let's do that. I mean, and I felt, Joe was at Ocean Way with Andy Johns, and I'm thinking, I got to bring my A game here.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to have to really step it up. In a sense, we're competing now. Joe and I are competing,
sure, yeah.
Which we've never done before. And so this thing's really got to be really great. And then when I realized the material wasn't really there, and suddenly he was going to invite all his friends over to sing, I thought, oh man, I think this is I don't know. I'm not sure how this is going to work out.
I think if he would have done that instrumental album, I think it would have competed at that point, because the instrumental tracks on there are pretty much, or to me, as strong as the stuff on the Extremist. On par, at least. I'm not saying it's better, but I would say it's on a level playing ground. That stuff's really strong.
Yeah, I would agree. Oh, there's one song on there that had great potential, but then got completely mucked up because George had a contest. I'm not sure.
I remember that. It was with Guitar Player Magazine, I think.
Was it Guitar Player Magazine?
Yeah.
Okay. Where he said, if you win the contest, you get to come to the studio and play guitar on my record.
That's right. Yeah.
And I said to George, I said, what if the guy isn't any good? And we're not really going to let him play, are we? I mean, really? I mean, I got George Lynch here. Why do I, you sure you want to do? He says, yeah, the guy's got to do a solo.
Wow. Yeah.
So we bring this. So, I'm game for anything, whatever. So George says, no, this is what we're going to do. And I respect that. Okay. So sure enough, the day comes where the kid shows up. I think he shows up with his dad, and they're super excited and super nervous. And the poor kid plugs in and starts playing, and he just falls apart. Absolutely can't play a thing. And again, this is before Pro Tools, so there wasn't anything we were going to be able to really do here, except for record him a bunch and hopefully comp something together.
Yeah.
And it was really trying. George, bless his heart, he gave this kid like 4 guitar solos, where it was half of one guitar solo, I think, and then a trade-off thing where George plays for 4 bars and the kid plays for 4 bars, and George plays for 4 bars and the kid plays for 4 bars, and it went on and on and on and on, and it was a lot of guitar playing. And I remember just trying to figure out how we were going to do this, and eventually, we recorded the guy 10 times playing, and we picked the best take, and then I think a couple of those solos I threw in backwards. I think you'll notice that. I would record the guitar solo section, the 4 bars.
Yeah.
I'd print it onto a 2-track tape recorder, and then I'd play that. I'd flip the tape upside down. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I would fly that backwards guitar into that slot again. And some of the solos were better backwards than they were forwards.
Oh, that's funny.
So we went with that. I'm not sure how many of those survived, but I know there's at least one of them. So if you were to hear that, you go, whoa, what's he doing there?
That's funny.
So I think in the end we patched it together, but it was really funny.
That album comes out, it kind of comes and goes a little bit, and of course you do come back to working with Joe again, and you've been working with him ever since, really on and off here and there.
On and off.
And but around, I don't know, somewhere around 2000, you made a switch to mastering, which was what led to that decision?
Well, I think I always felt I could do it.
Mm-hmm.
But, all the records I had made with Joe and certainly with the one I did with George and all the other records I made, even going back to the Dead Kennedy records, I always attended mastering. Not because I necessarily felt I had much to bring to the party, but I was super curious about the process.
Okay.
And, of course, when we first started, there was a lathe and vinyl involved. And so it was kind of like, the black art, and I was fascinated with, the record-making process when it came to vinyl. And that was not something I thought I could ever do because of the mechanics involved and because, I'm not going to go buy a lathe and start doing this myself. I would have to be brought up as an intern in a mastering house and go through that whole process, and that wasn't afforded to me at the time. So later on, when we just started making CDs and the vinyl became an afterthought, I said, I can do that. I started noticing what Bob Ludwig was doing and Bernie Drummond and George Marino. These are all guys that I sat there with record after record after record and watched how they did it. And just like back in the 70s when I was, introduced to to recording as a recording engineer, I said to myself, I can do that. I can see what they're doing. I can see how they use their ears and their skill set, and I think I can do that. So the Plant Recording Studios in Sausalito was alive and well in the late 90s. Metallica was there, and Joe had done a record there. Huey Lewis was there. God, who else was there at the time? Kenny Wayne Shepherd was doing a record. Dave Matthews was doing a record there. And they had this room in the back that was empty. So I went to the owner and I said, have you ever thought about having a mastering studio? And he said, well, sure, it's a good business, but it's all about the mastering engineer, not really about the gear. It's really about the guy. And I thought, well, yeah, he's right about that. So I said, well, what if I got a guy with a Rolodex, with clients? Mm-hmm. Would you ever think about building a room? And he goes, well, John, put together a business plan and get back to me, thinking that I'd probably just be discouraged and go away, right?
Oh, that's a famous set of words to make people run off. Business plan. You mean I got to think it through?
Yeah. Put together a business plan, yeah. So it just so happened that a local mastering studio here in town called Rocket, where I had done some work prior to that, was going out of business. And I think the owners wanted to move into video production, and they were tired of the CD mastering business. There was an engineer there, Michael Romanowski. And I went to him and I said, hey, this place is closing. You're going to be out of a job. How about if I go to the owners, get the Rolodex, and I go back to the plant and have them build a mastering studio, and you and I will be the mastering engineers. And he said, yeah. I didn't even know my place was closing. Okay. He didn't even know that they were about to shut down. So it was an easy sell for Michael. And so I went back. I put together a business plan which laid out all the gear, how the acoustics were going to be designed and who was going to design them and all that stuff. And I walked in with basically a business plan.
And clients.
Because Rocket, before they closed, were doing really well. I mean, they were doing 5 or 6 records a week. It was a nice little business. And so I thought, well, let's just transfer that to the plant with a better room. And then we have the plant's clientele that we can build from. And then in the process, I will learn this thing myself, and I will become a mastering engineer. It was my plan. So I came in and I said, hey, I need $250,000 to build the room, to get the gear, and to get this thing going. And Arnie Frager, bless his heart, looked at me and he says, let's do it. So it took about 6 months to get the room built properly. We had an acousticians come in and basically build the room from the ground up. I got all the latest state-of-the-art mastering gear that everybody had. Michael had a lot of good input on what to get, what not to get, blah blah blah. And we hit the ground running. I mean, we had clients lined up at the front door the day we opened, and basically ran a mastering business there for 8 years before the entire plant closed. And during that 8 years, I learned how to do it. I was able to really master the skill of it.
When it comes to mastering, what is the art of mastering? There's, yes, everybody knows there's setting the volume, but there's so much more to that. What is the art of mastering?
Well, the art or the goal?
Both.
Because there is the goal to mastering, when you talk about CDs specifically, the goal to mastering is really to make it as easy as possible for the listener to get through that CD from track 1 to track 10.
Okay.
In other words, you don't want the listener to have to jump up and adjust the volume or, heaven forbid, the EQ on every flippin' song as you go through the thing. If you've ever gotten a mixtape from somebody that has music from a bunch of different sources, you'll know that it's hard to listen to. One song's really loud, one song's very soft, one song's got a lot of bass, the next song has no bass, one song's acoustic guitar and vocal, next song's a heavy rock band. You're there continually turning the volume up and down, and maybe even fooling with the EQ just to get through the damn thing. Well, that's what would happen to records, even ones made by the same people in the same studios, if they're not mastered properly. So the goal is to have smooth transitions between the material, allow the music to work together on the same CD together. And nowadays, it's just as important as it's ever been, because you've got different people mixing the records. You might have 3 or 4 different mixers mixing songs from different studios all on the same record. How do those live together on one platform, if you will? So now, how do you arrive at those balances? You do it with EQ. You do it sometimes with some compression, and you do it with limiting. There's tools, that mastering engineers use, both analog, hardware, and digital, that allow you to make the fine adjustments to help each song live together on the CD and put together the sequence. That's sort of the musical, what you hear stuff that mastering engineers do. There's also all the technical part, because once it leaves the mastering engineer's hands, it goes to a pressing plant where no one listens to it. From that point on, man, it's a mechanical process. And it can be 1,000 CDs for some local band, or it can be something like Joe's box set that gets hundreds of thousands of these things made. So you are really the final check. You are the one who is going to be the last person to, touch it, really. And so you got to go over that thing with a fine-tooth comb. It's really your job to be able to say, this thing is perfect. The songs are in the right order. Everything's spelt correctly. All the metadata is in there. All the ISRC codes are in there. All the transitions are right. All the fades are correct. All the files are completely intact, and everything is titled and named properly.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a lot of work. That's almost as much work as the musical part of it, the part where you use your ears and use your talent and your skills and your background and your your experience of music that gets applied to what people hear. But behind that, there's a huge amount of technical stuff that has to be right. And that's why, when people go, well, why do you charge so much for mastering when I can there's a guy who'll charge me $100 to master the record.
Yeah, he gets you to pay for.
And, the guy might do a great job with the ears, but he may not be doing such a great job with all the technical stuff. So, that's what you get when you pay to have mastering done by a professional. You can feel confident that when you get the thing in the mail or however you're going to receive it, you open it up and you put it in your CD player and hit play, it's going to actually be your record, not somebody else's, which has happened. Not with me, but I've heard that that's happened. Where a mastering engineer has actually put the wrong songs on the guy's wrong record.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. I've made in 10 years, I've made one mistake. I'd left off a song.
Oh, no.
Off a CD. Yeah, the guy called me and said, "Hey, man, I just got my CDs, man, and they sound great, but Where's track 6?
Now, is this for
Seriously.
for 1,000 print run or hundreds of thousands?
No, it was yes. Fortunately, it was a thousand CDs.
Yeah.
And I apologized, and I called up the pressing plant, and I said, I'm sending you a new master today. I want you to use that and send me the bill.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I paid for it. I paid for it not only because I felt it was the right thing to do as a businessman, but I also paid for it so I would never do that again.
Yeah.
I really wanted to feel the pain.
Yeah, yeah.
I really, I had to sit down and write that check for, I don't know what it was, $1,500, whatever it was. I wanted to feel the pain.
Now, vinyl's coming back, and I'm seeing things like.
No, why do people keep saying that?
Well, it's coming back a little bit anyway, but I'm also seeing mastered for iTunes when downloading some stuff off iTunes.
Let's say vinyl hasn't gone away yet. Let's just say that.
Okay, it's got a little bit of a hipster resurgence anyway.
Well, the hipsters like it, I know.
But also iTunes is they're claiming mastered for iTunes. Is that a whole different process, or are you mastering albums 3 different times for 3 different avenues?
No. When it comes to mastering an album, I'll just speak for all mastering engineers,
Sure.
We do the best we can for the CD format. That's really what we're focused on. From there, those mastered files get converted into all sorts of stuff. If it's for Amazon, it's going to be MP3s. If it's for Apple or iTunes, it's going to be what's called an AAC file, which is proprietary Apple codec. So we don't really take into consideration that. Having said that, Apple's attempt to get better audio quality is commendable, and mastered for iTunes is a way to work with mastering engineers to sort of get the quality up a notch or so, mostly for promotional reasons, or just because MP3s and AACs have gotten such a bad, compressed audio has gotten such a bad rap that anything you can do to sell the idea that your compressed files sound better than somebody else's is a good marketing strategy.
Yeah.
Having said that, I think that mastered for iTunes, where the mastering engineers give them masters that I don't want to get too technical here, but don't have aren't heavily compressed, are 24-bit, and where the ceiling is at least 1 dB below full scale, is a better avenue to get a more quality product.
Right.
So I think it's an interim thing. I think once we get to a point where data storage, which it already is for all intent and purposes, is there, and streaming is better, and people get faster internet connections, then we can just do away with this whole compressed audio stuff and just go with full, at least CD quality.
Yeah.
Those files are going to be, 5 to 10 times larger, but it's not going to matter because the internet speed is going to increase to a point where it's you're going to wait, 10 seconds opposed to, 30 seconds to get an album. So, I think, as far as a mastering engineer is concerned, there isn't anything we do on our end to when we're listening to it and when we're putting the thing together, to take any of that necessarily into consideration. It's just the delivery method.
Right.
You
Okay.
know, it's once it's done, how do we deliver it? And anything we can do to make it sound better on the consumer's end, we're into.
Absolutely. And what's next for you? So you have the home studio now, and how's the future looking?
For me, the future has just been great. I mean, I really enjoy working out of my own studio at my own pace. If I start mixing something and I just don't feel like I'm hearing anything, or sometimes I'll start mixing and I'm going, there's just no way I can do this. This is horrible. I can't listen to this anymore. I'll go take my dog for a walk. I'll go get something to eat, take my time, come back and go, oh, okay, I get it.
Yeah.
And then, 3 or 4 hours goes by and I'm heavy into it. So I really like the pace of working in my own place, on my own schedule. All the mastering I do is unattended. I don't have people hanging around, standing next to me, asking questions and bugging me. I think that produces a better product anyway, because I don't give it up until I'm really happy with it. And if you're in a mastering studio with a clock running, you have to give it up.
Yeah.
Because the clock says you have to give it up, whether I'm happy or not, and because they've run out of money and it's over. My method is different. I basically master the record until I'm happy with it. I send it to the client. If they like it, they pay me. If they don't like it, they don't have to pay me. And it's like no risk policy, if you will.
Right.
And that's something it was something I had to give up when I said I wasn't going to have people hanging around.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that makes sense.
Because, I know as a recording engineer that I always wanted to go to mastering because I wanted to hear my shit on their speakers,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to get their input on my, my work, and I wanted to ask them questions and bug them and stuff. And, so I can appreciate people that want that, but that's not what I do. And it's really worked out well. And, I master records from people from all over the world. And, people aren't going to fly here from Australia to spend 4 hours with me mastering a record. I mean, they're not going to do that. So this way, I do it. I send it to them. If they go, oh, my God, this is great, they pay me. If they go, wow, you went down the wrong road, you're definitely not the right guy for this record, then they can walk away. They don't owe me a thing. Because it does happen. It happens a couple of times a year where, my sensibilities and how I hear and what I want out of a record isn't necessarily maybe what a client wants. And I'm perfectly okay with that. It's perfectly fine with me. But most of the time, 99% of the time, it's not the case. Mixing, same thing. I really enjoy mixing projects. I find them really challenging at times and very, very difficult. It's kind of like standing at the bottom of a mountain before a climb. You look up and go, I ain't going to make it up there. I mean, there's this really...
Yeah.
That's a long ways away, and I don't even know if I have the energy for that. But then, sooner or later, you find yourself at the top of the mountain and enjoying the view, going, wow, I actually did that. So there's always a sense of a real accomplishment when you get finished mixing an album. So I still do that. In fact, right now, right in front of me, I've got 4 songs that Joe recorded on the Unstoppable Momentum album, his last album, that are orphans. In other words, they didn't make it to the album because he didn't feel like they fit. That he wants to know whether or not they're usable for his next record. So he's asked me to mix those, and that's what I'm doing.
Oh, great.
Currently.
It really did.
Yeah.
It really has come full circle. Here you are with new Joe recordings in front of you.
That's right.
This time at your home instead of some studio with the ticking away at the thousands of dollars.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about it. Socially, the camaraderie, I really miss that. I really miss getting up in the morning and going to a studio and working in one room, and another band who I admire or an engineer I admire is working down the hall, and we have lunch together, and there's we hang out and talk music and stuff like that. That part, I really miss that. The only way I get exposed to that anymore is that when I'm hired to record a record or produce a record, then I do that at a formal recording studio where we go and we spend a week or two, and I have that kind of experience. But when it comes to mixing, I just don't have that anymore. So that was something that I do miss in the grand scheme of things. But the cost, it's crazy. Right, the studios I work in, they're still in the $1,000 a day category. And then they have to hire someone like myself, and there's more money there, and then they got to feed everybody. Still, to make a record in a nice studio, you're still talking a few $1,000s a day.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's a lot of money for an indie band.
Yeah.
It's a lot of money for a band that isn't on a record label. And so if I can mix their record for, a third of what it would normally cost them, or even less, that's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's really good. It's a good thing for them, and it's a good thing for me, because I'm not paying a studio. They're really only paying me. They're not even paying for a studio. Is really how it all ultimately works out.
Okay, John, how can bands get a hold of you?
Oh, well, I have a website, johncuniberti.com. And from there, they can navigate around, see what's going on, see what I've done, see what I'm doing, seeing what I like, what I don't like. There's tons of photographs from all the projects we spoke of. There's a link to an email. They can email me.
Perfect.
If they want to talk, or whatever.
Great.
So, yeah, that's the best way.
Thanks a lot for being on the show. This has been fantastic.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
And that's the story of John Cuniberti. Great guy, lots of great stories. I hope you enjoyed it. If you're new to the show, check out thedoubletstop.com to hear all of past episodes. We'll see you next Monday.